Everybody here heard of the Hawaii Ironman Triathlon? Are you familiar with that particular event? In case you don't know what it is, it's a particularly grueling endurance sport. It begins with a 2.4-mile open ocean water swim. And one of the challenges is not to get drowned by your fellow competitors as you take off. But when they get out of the water, they go to the first transition stage. They put on some biking shoes, and they hit the bike portion. 112 miles through lava fields where the temperature will get over 100 degrees on an average day. When they get done with the biking portion, they go to the next transition phase where they get the cycling shoes off, they put on their running shoes, and they begin to run a full marathon. 26.2 miles after everything else. And as you can imagine, at that point, their bodies are pretty exhausted. They've given almost everything they have, and those that come to the finish line are just so thrilled at their victory. But some people really struggle along the way. This was 1982. Julie Moss, about a third of the way into the marathon, had taken possession of the women's lead. But the toll began to really take itself onto her body, and she began to stop and walk during the drinking stops, but just kept plugging along and just kept putting one foot in front of the other, but grew more and more tired physically and mentally. She kept running as the sun went down when it hit, and it's kind of hard to see, but that's called the wall. She just hit the wall and collapsed. And she did her best to kind of make her way back to her feet to see if she could finish, but only to collapse again. And people alongside wanted to help out, but you can't really touch her, and so she just kind of struggled to make her way up to her feet again. And at this point, it was a question whether she would make it at all. But she began to walk and walk, and that walk kind of turned into a slow and ungainly jog, and off she went into the night, and off she went to the finish line and complete her endurance test. She hit the wall. You know, it occurs to me that when we have been betrayed, it's like hitting the wall. Physically, when you hit the wall, your body and your mind are just so tired, so exhausted, in so much pain that they're crying out, quit. When we hit the wall because we've been betrayed, our spirit, because of its pain and agony, its anger and frustration, just cries out, just stop. You're breaking down. And we feel the breakdown happen in our bodies, in our minds, in our hearts, in our spirit. We feel the breakdown happening after we've been betrayed. We can feel ourselves becoming an angry person. We can feel ourselves becoming a bitter person, a resentful person. We can feel ourselves becoming an isolated person. We can feel ourselves becoming a cynical person. We can feel ourselves becoming an unforgiving person. We can begin to lose all hope that we can ever have a really good and substantial life. We begin to ask ourselves the question, what's the use of even trying to be the right kind of person? What's the use? And we can be so tired and so hurt and so angry that we just stop caring. And at that moment, we have a choice. Will I break down and become someone I don't want to be, living the life I don't want to live, or will I somehow find a way to break out? To break through, to find a new way, to a new kind of life that's every bit as good, maybe even better than the life I had that was shattered by betrayal. Will I allow betrayal to crush me, or will I crush it and break out to a better life? We were reminded last week that we all get betrayed. It's just a near universal human phenomenon. People People might be betrayed by their marriage partner or their business partner. They might be betrayed by a boss, a co-worker, or a subordinate. They might be betrayed by a family member or a really good friend. They might be betrayed by a counselor, by a teacher, by a clergyman, by a politician. Betrayal just happens. We trust someone with a part of our dream for life, and they take that trust and they smash it by acting in ways intentionally that inflict pain on us, and we see our dream of life shattered. And when that happens, not if, but when that happens, we learned last week that it's like we become shackled. We become shackled to these shattered dreams and wonder if our life can ever really be as good as we had hoped. We become shackled to second guessing. Oh, if only I had done this, if only I had done that. We find ourselves shackled to resentment. How could that person do that to me? And it's like we're in betrayal prison. And the question is, will we be broken by those shackles, or will we break out? We began last week investigating the story of a man whose name is Joseph. His story is found in the first book of the Bible, the book of Genesis. It begins in chapter 37, runs all the way through chapter 50. And his story is a story of betrayal. And God gives it so much prominence and so much ink because he knows you and I, our stories include betrayal as well. And Joseph lets us know not only what happens when we're betrayed, but how it is we can break out of the shackles of betrayal and break through to a life more wonderful than we ever could initially have imagined. Joseph was betrayed by his own family, by those that were closest to him, that he should have been able to trust the most. And he was sold into slavery and sentenced to live in a foreign country. But somehow, in what Joseph did, he managed to break out of the shackles of betrayal, and he ended up rising through the ranks to become the second most powerful person in the most powerful empire on the planet at the time. And it was through Joseph that his family and his race were saved from extinction. And today we want to be able to learn from Joseph how it is that we can break out of the shackles of betrayal and break through to a better life, rather than break down to a life nobody would want. And as we read his story there in Genesis 39, I suppose if we really wanted to condense it down in its simplest form, we could probably put it something like this. The way to break out of the shackles of betrayal, to break through to a better life, is to act in ways that God can bless. It's just that simple. And that hard. If in the midst of the pain and the frustration and the anger and the shattered dreams and the resentment we can feel in betrayal, if we will determine we will act in ways that God can bless, we will become better people and we will be led to a better life than we ever could have imagined. That's how it was with Joseph. It says in Genesis 39, after he's been betrayed, sold into slavery, he goes down into Egypt. It says, now when Joseph arrived in Egypt, he was purchased by Potiphar, a member of the personal staff of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. And Potiphar was the captain of the palace guard. And the Lord was with Joseph and blessed him greatly as he served in the home of his Egyptian master. And Potiphar noticed this and realized that the Lord was with Joseph, giving Joseph success, blessing him in everything that he did. So Joseph naturally became quite favorable with Potiphar. And soon Potiphar put Joseph in charge of the entire household and entrusted him with all of his business dealings. And from that day, Joseph was blessed by God in all that he did.